G'day. Welcome to another discussion on street sociology. Now, today I'm going to be discussing restrictions on unvaccinated people, specifically in the Australian context. I can't really speak for the rest of the world because every country has significantly different either social conditions or vaccination coverage rates, so I can't apply this to everyone. So in this instance, I'm going to apply it to the Australian context because we are now over 90% double vaccinated, ages 12 and up. Which leads me to my point. Basically, restricting unvaccinated people from entering various facilities, shops, retail, pubs, the like. Now that we have got such a high vaccination rate, to be frank, I'm not really sure it's the best way forward at this point. Not least of all because early next year, according to the government, children from the ages of 5 and up whose parents allow them to be are going to be vaccinated also, which will again significantly increase our coverage yet again. Therefore, given events both in Australia and Europe in the last few weeks, violent protest and the like, I don't necessarily think it's in our best interest as a society to continue locking these people out, given our vaccination rate in Australia is so very high. I have had a bit of a rethink on this because I am fortunate enough to have good friends who are vaccinated and pro-restriction, pro-mandate, others who are vaccinated and are against mandates and restrictions, and others who are unvaccinated and are against these things, which I'm fortunate in that gives me a perspective, and I'm not so sure that quite a lot of people have that at the moment. See, I think something like 95% of adults now in Australia over 18 are vaccinated. So it's very easy with a 95% majority to find oneself in an echo chamber where you find that everyone you speak to on the internet, your family, your friends, they all agree with you. In a way, that can be a dangerous thing because that's an echo chamber, whether you're part of the 5% of people who don't want to be vaccinated or let's say aren't, and the people they speak to are all of the same opinion. On the other side, 95% of people that are vaccinated and are of roughly the same or similar opinion, it can be very easy to exclude the other. And you can end up believing that everyone pretty much agrees with your worldview. Of course I've been guilty of this. Everybody has. But a few weeks ago in discussions with some of my unvaccinated friends, it became clear to me the amount of psychological distress being locked out is causing them, given, for their own reasons, they genuinely have no wish to be vaccinated. One could argue, and some do, that this is somehow a moral abdication on their part of doing something for the benefit of all society. I think it's a little more complex than that. First of all, not everybody in any society in the world is going to agree on everything, okay? And people that don't agree with you, or the 95% in this case, having spoken to numerous among them, and they explain their views to me, some of them are quite rational, okay? So I think one person who's probably a fan of QAnon, rather extremist conspiracy, and hey, democracy, dude, you can't ban an idea. But most of the people I know who aren't vaccinated aren't of that persuasion at all, or necessarily interested in any sort of conspiracy thing. They have a wide range of their own reasons for not wanting to be vaccinated. And I suppose I was guilty of not fully realizing that until I spoke to them in person. And we're causing people a lot of psychological distress for, frankly, not a great deal of benefit. Again, in my opinion, I'm not a health professional, right? I may well be wrong. It's just what I've seen. Given that our vaccination rate's so high, I don't think we should keep locking people out for being unvaccinated. You can make your own choices, dude. It's illegal not to wear a seatbelt. And most fatalities that happen on the road, I think about 2/3 in my state, happen from people not wearing seatbelts. But I'm not going to... People can make choices. And even if the choices they make we don't agree with, doesn't necessarily mean they're stupid or wrong. Everybody can be wrong. At some point or another, everybody is wrong. But I don't support the idea of continuing to punish people who've made a choice that in this instance, due to our high vaccination rate, is not going to be particularly deleterious to society. Some of you who may watch this are not vaccinated, and most of your circle won't be vaccinated. And a lot of people who watch this, of the few who do, will be vaccinated, and their entire circle and friend group will be vaccinated. It's very easy to say the other person's wrong and we don't understand, but being fortunate enough to be in a position where I can speak to people from different positions on either end of the spectrum, I cannot in good conscience support this continuing, given our rate is so high. Now, prior to us reaching 80%, I don't see any other way other than the vaccine mandates we had for certain industries to get there, given that with hesitancy, perhaps we might only have got to 70% vaccinated or 65% of adults, which is the case in a number of European countries at the moment. And we've seen in the last few weeks, if you follow this stuff, some quite significant violence and rioting taking place in a number of Western European countries in forms of resistance to these mandates and these lockouts of the unvaccinated. Now, this is a very challenging topic over there, but in the Australian context, because our vaccination rate is so high, that is a concern we can ameliorate. I propose, are we going to be going into lockdown, or not lockdowns, but having to have some restrictions on movement and this and that for the next couple of years, especially in the winter months? I think that's quite likely, but I think we should do it together. I don't think that segregating the last, let's say, 5% of holdouts against a COVID vaccine away from the rest of society is good. I think, do we have to do that at first? Hey, tell me last time this happened in your life. It's not an easy situation. We've had to make hard decisions for a hard situation. But I think there's a limit. I think that we have reached a point of safety where we can probably let these people get off the hook, so to speak. So I guess the importance here overall that perhaps we can think about is that there's a lot of people who don't agree with me or you or anybody else. But we mustn't try and put these people in too big of a pigeonhole. Some people who don't want to be vaccinated have some very stern things to say about their perspective on the vaccinated. Some might say hateful. But that cuts both ways. I have heard a great deal of hateful language used towards unvaccinated people as well. This kind of thing, perhaps we haven't had this to this extent in Australia before, but let's consider, I believe it was about 2 weeks ago in Melbourne, there was a gentleman at a large protest driving a vehicle around Parliament House with a gallows on a trailer on the back. And we've definitely never had that before in Australia. Now, perhaps some of those people who attended that violence thought it was just or worthy, but if the 95% were threatening to execute their favourite politician, or a politician they liked, that was democratically elected in a democracy, the kick-off would be extreme. So it would behoove the unvaccinated to not drive around the centre of major cities threatening to hang someone who was democratically elected. That being said, a number of vaccinated people going around saying that the unvaccinated should be, put in camps, taken away from society for a long time, all kinds of divisive, hateful language. It's not helping either side. Please remember that our disagreements, all of them, are with the government, state and federal, not with each other. And it's not just a matter of political division, it's a matter of, I'm seeing really the denigration of each other and hate speech levelled at each other. And we are quite naive in Australia. We've not really seen this before. But you see, the rest of the world has. There's been times in the history of Europe where people have denigrated each other because the government told them to. And ended up using hate speech, which carries on to violence. We've seen it in the United States too. And no matter how good and righteous you might feel, being vaccinated or unvaccinated, that kind of language leads to hate. Hate that can't be undone very quickly. So I feel as though everyone's got wind in their sails about what they think's right and everyone else is wrong. Hey, maybe you're right. But stop hating on each other, man. I mean, you're allowed to dislike people, but the language is getting hate-filled and violent, and I can tell you we might not understand too well in Australia as a populace where that goes, But I do have an understanding of where that goes myself, and we don't need to bring that to Australia. It's better for us to stay a little bit naive about the rest of the world than to make problems, be they imported from, in this instance, the United States, in Europe, mostly the United States. We don't need to do that. So look, listen to people you don't agree with. Not the ones who drive around with the gallows or, on the other side, say that unvaccinated people should be put in the sea. Okay, don't listen to that. Listen to earnest discussions from people you don't agree with. And not just about COVID, but anything. Please. That's where we learn the most. We learn the most from other people who disagree with us, but have a perfectly rational reason for doing so. And it can give us all a new perspective. That's what I have to say today. But let's not take this further than it needs to go. And in fairness to all the good, honest, unvaccinated people I know, and there are many, I don't think it's fair, right, or beneficial to anyone in society to continue demonising and excluding unvaccinated people, especially with such a high vaccination rate here, which gives us the freedom to make that choice. So let's hope we make the right one. Street sociology.